live in the age of the do-it-yourselfer. Look at the popular TV networks, the ever-noticeable businesses that promote your being a person who is willing to do it yourself. In the face of the self-glorifying philosophy of the new century, it is difficult to get people to think in terms of surrendering to God in anything. Most people think they know best. Oh, they may not be arrogant enough to come right out and say so, but they are thinking, I'll do this my way. We need to be reminded of a man in the Bible who wanted to be healed. He wanted God to heal him, but to do it in the way he wanted it to be done. It was not just a matter of healing, but of healing his way. At first, he didn't accept the prescription of the divine physician. He didn't accept that God knew best. He had his own plan. We need to learn some things from his example in 2 Kings 5. So when you need God's help with anything, you need to remember to, number one, confess your own need of it. Most of us have trouble admitting that we have a need that we can do nothing about. We want to grab a quick remedy and be on with our plan. In 2 Kings 5, Naaman wanted to handle his own need. He had no clue of his dependence on God for all of the provisions of his life. In verse 1, Naaman was a general of the army under the king Aram. He was important to his master, who held him in the highest esteem, because it was by him that God had given victory to Aram, a truly great man, but afflicted with a grievous skin disease. And there it is. It is very hard for many of us to admit that we are in need. We think we can solve our own problems. That reminds me of the arrogance of those at the highest levels of our government today, and it reminds me of each of us who is influenced by that philosophy and ideology of life. God has designed each of our lives and his world so that we are all in need of his help. We are made to depend on him, not on our human means or ourselves. We are all sinners, and we all need salvation and eternal life from him. When God was ready to deal with Naaman, he chose Elisha as his spokesperson. Elisha was careful to treat Naaman as he would anyone else, a human being in need of help. It is as we confess that we have a need that God is able to help us. God does not honor arrogance and pride. He is a ready helper to those who have a humble and contrite heart. You will never have a need met until you recognize your need of it. You will never have a relationship with God until you confess your need of him. Number 2, learn to concede your selfish demands. When God's servant didn't react to Naaman by treating him differently and with great deference, he became angry. In verse 11 we read, Naaman lost his temper. He turned on his heel, saying, I thought he'd personally come out and meet me, call on the name of God, wave his hand over the diseased spot, and get rid of the disease. That was his own self-devised plan of recognition, healing, and recovery. He wanted a spectacular and publicly noted miraculous healing. Too many times people demand a miracle from God as a condition for believing in him and in his healing power. God does do the miraculous, but he makes the decision about when. Most of the time, God still uses means in healing. There is nothing less significant or permanent in that. God teaches us in the book of James that we are to call the pastor to pray and call the physician to practice medicine on us when we need to be healed. God sometimes works extraordinarily in our lives. Sometimes he acts in ordinary ways. In no instance is it any less remarkable when we have our needs met, whether they are physical, emotional, relational, mental, financial, or otherwise. God uses physicians, counselors, or other professionals to bring blessing into our lives. That does not mean God's hand is not involved in the healing or in the answer. He is the divine physician, and there is no healing and no answer that is not divine. All of God's works are spectacular. And then third, concur with his plan. In our story, Naaman had devised his own plan for healing his disease. He had it all worked out. He orchestrated it to bring attention to him and notoriety to himself. He wanted everyone to recognize that he had been healed of a dreaded disease. He wanted vindication. He wanted to choose the method and the means of healing. God wasn't impressed with his selfish requests. God always has the better plan. We just have to be willing to concur with his plan. No matter what we are asking of God, we need to trust God to make it happen by his plan and in his timing. Naaman said, I thought he'd personally come out and meet me, call on the name of God, wave his hand over the disease spot, and get rid of the disease. That was his plan. God's plan looked a little different. God told him to go to the Jordan River and immerse himself in it 7 times. In verse 10, Elisha sent out a servant to meet him with the message, go to the river Jordan and immerse yourself 7 times. Your skin will be healed and you'll be as good as new. There it is, a simple and sure way to be healed and a promise of healing. But Naaman had a different way. He suggested other rivers. God wasn't impressed, and neither is he with our self-devised plans. Naaman chose to sulk. God may be waiting to bless your life right now, but he's not able to because you are unwilling to concur with his plan. And fourth, connect with his plan. Naaman finally got the picture. He decided to connect with God's plan. When he first heard God's plan, in verses 12 through 14, he stomped off, mad as a hornet. But his servants caught up with him and said, Father, if the prophet had asked you to do something hard and heroic, wouldn't you have done it? So why not this simple, wash and be clean? So he did it. And he went down and immersed himself in the Jordan 7 times. His skin was healed. It was like the skin of a little baby. He was as good as new. Wow. As soon as he surrendered and connected with God's plan, he was healed. You can never improve on God's plan, so don't even try. When we do it our way, it always turns out badly. When we do it his way, it always works for our good and his glory. You know you need God's help to meet that need in your life, but will you sulk or will you surrender?